What if the dead could still confess? What if the answers we've begged for were buried 6 feet under? This story isn't about the living. It's about the dead and the silence they left behind, and how one day that silence broke itself wide open. Her name was Catherine Blackburn, Albany, New York, 1964. A small town that slept behind locked doors, believing evil was something that happened somewhere else. But not here. Not to her. I'll tell you what happened to Catherine, but not yet. First, let me take you to the moment the world stopped believing in safety. They called it one of the coldest autumns Albany ever saw. Leaves like rusted coins scattered down quiet streets. And in one of those houses, a woman was preparing for her morning walk. She never came back. When her neighbor knocked, the door was unlocked. Inside, the air was heavy, still. On the kitchen counter, a half-finished cup of tea. In the hallway, silence that felt wrong. Catherine Blackburn had been murdered, and the way she died would haunt this town for 6 decades. In the 60s, people trusted the police. They trusted justice. They believed killers were strangers, monsters from the dark. But what if the monster was someone who waved hello every morning? Detectives searched, questioned, compared fingerprints. Nothing matched. And as the years passed, Catherine's case turned cold, locked away in a box marked unsolved. Police have few leads in the brutal slaying of 50-year-old Catherine Blackburn. The killer vanished, and time, merciless as it is, began to erase her story. But sometimes, time isn't the enemy. Sometimes, it's the accomplice. Because as years rolled by, science was learning how to speak the language of the dead. What the detectives of 1964 couldn't see, the technology of 2024 could. And when the old evidence box was opened, what they found inside would change everything. A faded envelope, a label written in shaky ink. Evidence, do not discard. Inside, a small scrap of something that had waited 60 years to speak. A voice trapped in dust. And it was about to confess. For 60 years, this box hadn't been opened. It waited through retirements, through wars, through generations. Inside it, the frozen breath of a killer. When cold case detectives reopened the Blackburn file, they weren't sure what they'd find. But when they peeled back that tape, one faint trace of evidence clung to life. A thread, a smear, a remnant of someone who had once breathed the same air as Catherine Blackburn. The question was, could modern science wake it up? They ran it through the system, and something happened. A match, partial, incomplete, but too close to ignore. But the name attached to that match was one nobody expected, because the man it belonged to had been dead for nearly 30 years. Joseph Nowakowski, a quiet man, a mechanic, a neighbor, the kind who'd lend you a wrench and wish you a good day. He died in 1998, buried with a folded flag and a peaceful smile. No one ever guessed that beneath that smile slept the truth Catherine took to her grave. Detectives didn't want to believe it. They needed proof that could speak louder than coincidence. So they did something few investigators ever dare to do. They went to court to ask permission to dig up the dead. It's one thing to chase a killer. It's another to chase his bones. In February of 2025, the grave of Joseph Nowakowski was opened. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, he saw the light again. But this time, it wasn't sunlight. It was the sterile glare of justice. They took bone samples, hair, tooth pulp, everything that could still hold a whisper of his identity. And when the lab results came back, silence filled the room. Because that whisper matched the scream left behind in Catherine's home. For 60 years, The grave had confessed. Catherine Blackburn's killer had lived, worked, laughed, and died free. He was never punished, but the truth still found him. Yet, this story isn't over, because when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't just shatter a mystery, it broke a family. It rewrote a town's history, and it forced everyone to ask, how well do you really know the people next door? Every town has a man like him. Kind, dependable, always ready to help fix your car, shovel your snow, lend a screwdriver. A man who looks ordinary enough to vanish into the crowd. Joseph Nowakowski was that man. The files say he served in the army, married once, quiet divorce, no children. A face that never made headlines, until it was printed next to a word no one saw coming: murderer. Back in 1964, detectives actually spoke to Joseph. He lived less than half a mile from Catherine Blackburn's home. Said he heard nothing, knew nothing. They took his statement and crossed him off the list. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no motive. He walked out of that station, lit a cigarette, and melted back into everyday life. But what the investigators couldn't see was the darkness that followed him home. Neighbors said he rarely smiled for photos. Some nights they'd hear his radio playing long after midnight. Other nights, nothing at all. In the decades that followed, he became part of the furniture of the town. Invisible, familiar, safe. He aged, grew frail, died quietly in his sleep in 1998. His obituary called him a beloved community member. For 27 years, his family brought flowers to his grave, thinking of him as a gentle soul, until the day detectives knocked on their door. They told his daughter what the DNA showed. Her face didn't move at first. Then she whispered, "No, not my dad." They showed her the evidence, the match reports, the timeline. Everything pointed to him. And she said something that still chills me. She said, "He used to sit by the window at night staring at nothing. Now I know what he was seeing." In that moment, a family's entire history collapsed. The father they buried with honor had buried a secret instead. And it took 60 years for that secret to claw its way back to the surface. But how did Catherine's path ever cross his? Why her? What bound their fates together that night? That part of the story took decades to understand. And when investigators pieced it together, it exposed a twist that even time couldn't hide. It was March 19th, 1964, a Thursday, cold enough that breath turned to mist. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, Catherine Blackburn stopped breathing. No one heard the scream. No one saw the man who walked through her unlocked back door. But the house itself remembered everything. Detectives pieced together fragments: a falling glass, a trail of soil on the kitchen floor, and a broken necklace clasp near the couch. Each clue whispered what the body couldn't. He didn't come to steal. He came because he'd been watching her. In his diary, found decades later in a box of military keepsakes, he wrote a single line that still feels like a chill down the spine. "Sometimes I walk past her house just to remember what peace looks like." Investigators believe he entered through the back door around 1:20 a.m. Catherine likely woke to a sound. She turned on the light, and there he was. The struggle was brutal. A broken wrist, torn night dress. She fought, harder than he expected. A chair overturned, clock knocked to the floor, the hands frozen at 1:28 a.m. Then silence. That was the sound her neighbors heard and didn't understand. The next morning when Catherine's sister found her, the clock was still ticking, but for someone else. Because across town, Joseph Nowakowski was already at work, laughing with his coworkers, drinking his morning coffee. He lived with that secret for 34 years. While Catherine's mother aged into despair, while cold case detectives came and went, while her home was sold and resold, His fingerprints slept under her nails, waiting for science to wake up. And then, decades later, when DNA forensics evolved, a small sample under her nails matched a man already in the database. A man named Joseph Nowakowski. But here's the thing, he was dead. And yet his DNA had just confessed to murder. Detectives got a court order. They opened his grave, and as rain fell over the cemetery, they took a bone sample from the man the town thought was kind. The match came back definitive. 1 in 3.4 trillion chance of being anyone else. But that's not where the story ends. Because when they searched his old home, they found something else. Something that changed everything again. A small, locked metal tin. Inside, dozens of newspaper clippings, all about unsolved murders of women from the same decade. It wasn't just Catherine. She may have been the one who fought hardest, but she wasn't the only one. The discovery triggered a nationwide review. DNA was tested in 4 other cold cases, and that's where the second twist surfaced. One that no one, not even the detectives, saw coming. Because one of those DNA samples, it didn't just match Joseph Nowakowski, it matched someone else. Someone still alive. The lab report was supposed to close the case, but instead, it opened another. When the results came back, they didn't just show Joseph Nowakowski's DNA, they showed a partial match, half identical, half foreign. That meant one thing: the killer had a blood relative still alive. Investigators traced the match to a man living 3 states away, a 62-year-old retired electrician named Mark Nowakowski, Joseph's nephew. When agents knocked on his door, he didn't flinch. He'd been waiting for them. He invited them in, made coffee, and said words that stopped everyone cold. He said, "I always wondered how long it would take for him to drag me down with him." Turns out, Mark was 13 years old when Catherine was killed. He often visited his uncle's home, the same uncle who police now knew was a predator hiding behind a smile. Mark told investigators his uncle had taken him on night drives he never wanted to remember. One of those nights, Joseph took him past Catherine Blackburn's house. Mark said his uncle told him to wait in the car, that he'd be right back, and when he returned, his hands were shaking. Years later, as a teenager, Mark found blood-stained fabric in his uncle's garage and buried it in the woods out of fear. When detectives excavated that spot in 2022, they found a rusted belt buckle and traces of Catherine Blackburn's DNA. Mark wasn't a killer, but he'd carried the secret and the guilt his entire life, because when he was finally brave enough to tell someone, no one believed him. That partial DNA match wasn't from the crime. It came from a cut on Mark's hand from the night his uncle dragged him into darkness. The grave had confessed, but it also revealed something deeper: how evil doesn't die with the body. It echoes in the blood of those left behind. When the case finally closed in 2024, the lead detective said something I can't forget. He said Catherine didn't just get justice, she pulled an entire family out of the shadows. Catherine Blackburn's story isn't just about the monster who took her life. It's about the persistence of truth and how time can bury evidence but not conscience. 60 years after her death, a whisper from the past found its voice, and when it did, the grave confessed.